Hi, everyone. Welcome to our newest episode of the Reach podcast. Today, we're actually going to be starting part one of our school series. You just got to college. Now what?
Oh, that's right. I remember the first time I went to college and it was, okay, cool, new place. This is where I can get pizza. This is where I can get pizza on campus. Now what?
I love the reference to pizza. Honestly, same. For me, it was like, okay, I know where my room is. Great. I know where I can go get some food. Great. Uh, what about everything else though? What about my classes? What about people? I have to deal with people here, more people than I did in high school.
And sometimes an even bigger change, a roommate.
Oh, roommates. Yes. Roommates were definitely a lovely part of my college experience. What about you, Conrad?
It varied. I had one really good one in my last school.
That's awesome. For me,
So
I wouldn't say like roommates were like a horrible experience, but I would say that there were some that were better than others. You know, I could definitely say that confidently.
yeah, so let's backtrack a bit. So get to campus. What would you recommend the first few things to do?
I think the first few things that I would do is number one, make sure that I have my schedule or at least like a good idea of where the buildings I'm supposed to go for my first day of classes. That's one of the first things, especially because you don't want to be that lost little freshman or first year college student, depending on how you identify yourself at that point, and go, where's my class? I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. So, one of the things that I really enjoyed about my college experience was I already had an idea of what my classes were like in terms of the location, in terms of the actual class size too. I was able to actually get an idea of what that looked like. And I could also look at the rosters too, so I could see who was in my classes too.
Yeah, that's a newer feature. I never looked at the roster. Like everybody would usually tell me, "Oh, hey, I'm in a class with you," but like I was the one that didn't look at it. See, me personally, the first thing I would do getting to campus is like, okay, let's get a home base situated. Let's get a room situated, know how to get in and out of it. This way, if you're overstimulated, you have a place to come back to.
Absolutely. Especially when you have a situation, I don't know about you in your case, but when I was going to college, we had to swipe our IDs whenever we were going in and out of our building, and then we had room keys. So we had two whole different locking mechanisms. On top of that, we had elevators and we also had stairs. And so we had to make sure that if the elevators were out, we found the nearest stairwell. And living on the seventh floor during my freshman year of college, it was horrible. It was horrible having to do the stairs.
So my freshman year, um, the key I was given to the building never worked.
Hard.
What it resonated with me was just the general autistic experience of, yeah, this bothers me. Good tips I would recommend is no matter what they say, advocate for yourself, even if you have to drag them to it.
Yeah,
Second, um, a lot of colleges, especially when I first started, if you lost your key, first time, they'll give you a pass. After that, they may charge you. And my recommendation is if you're going to leave your room, before you leave the room, put your foot in the way of the door so it doesn't shut all the way. Check for the key on your person. Make it a habit. Because if you have the key on your person, then you won't get locked out.
absolutely, absolutely. And in my case, so we had we had keys that like actual like keys that you would put in the door and
I've
everything.
had both.
You had both? Okay, yeah. See, I only have the key experience where we just had like the one key in the door, and we got one free pass a semester. And if you went above that free pass, it was $25 to get into your room.
Yeah.
25, that adds up, you know?
Yes. And yeah, I've seen that in more than one college. I actually had a college where they had the RFID plastic keys, but they were so thin that they would break easy.
How much did it
So
cost to replace those?
that was like $5 or something like that to replace it. but I'm like, that would add up. So what I ended up doing was put it in my wallet and it did not leave. That way it had a hard backing and it could not bend.
For me, what I found to be the most effective was I had a little like wristlet and I also had lanyard. So anywhere that my lanyard was, it would always come with me because there was always the ID, there was always the key, and then there was always like if I needed like a debit card or something, so I had all of those things together. Now, if they get lost, of course that's very much like an oh my goodness moment. What am I going to do? I have to replace all these things. However,
Yeah.
if you have something that is very clear, very like if you had a lanyard that is like very bright or, there's something on that lanyard that that means it's yours, I definitely recommend having one. I was able to use that and I would put like my lanyard around my neck. I would put my lanyard in my pocket. There was always some stereotypes about lanyards around the neck, which I always thought was so odd, but that being said, when you had something like that holding on to the lanyard was that much easier.
I get the holy lanyard thing. I just don't like things on my neck.
Fair. I know a lot of people don't like a lot of lanyards on their neck at all.
So that's why it ended up in my wallet. Even if like I'd be requested to have the ID visible, I'm like, just ask. I will show it to you. It's not going on my neck.
Absolutely, absolutely. As long as you know where your ID is, as long as you have like a clear idea of where things are, then that's a system that is absolutely something you can make your own.
We can enter and exit our rooms, and our rooms are set up. What next? This is where I would definitely go to knowing where things are.
Yeah.
A side trip you wouldn't want to do if you need to know how to navigate campus. Accommodations. Make sure you have an appointment with accommodations. Some schools are so nice where those with neurodivergencies get to have a nice tour of the school with the neurodivergent group by themselves. So it's nice, quiet, low key, and they will specifically guide you through it.
Each school has its own disabilities department. And so basically, if you needed specific accommodations, you went to that department to basically advocate for what accommodations you needed. In college, I actually was a note taker for a few students that were in my major, and it was because it was a service that they needed. So I was able to take very thorough notes and be able to hand them off to them at the end of classes, each and every single class.
Which is awesome. Like it's good to be able to have that, and I'm sure student employment getting
Yeah.
paid to do the note taking as well. Yes, so that's always a nice thing. If anybody listening who's great at typing and multitasking, which is going to vary in our own demographic because everybody's different. But for those that can and help others who are like us, please, someone out there would just benefit from that, and
Absolutely.
it also looks good on a resume. This is experience.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's just one example of an accommodation too. There may be tour leaders that can do, private tours, like what you were just saying a second ago, Conrad, about doing private tours to make sure that, they go through each of the buildings, maybe even finding paths that might work for that student, finding specific doors, finding specific elevators that are needed that can help the student be able to navigate campus.
Yeah, and I've been on in quite a few campuses. So I've seen campuses that were within walking distance of all the buildings, like really, really close. I've seen campuses that were like literally on top of a hill and you had to book it across to get to your next class. My last school had buses because I think it was, I could have the percentage wrong, but it's somewhere between 60 and 70% of the town was the school. So they had buses that were running from building to building. And you had an app that you had to pull up to know what bus you were going on to get to what building. It had timings, and sometimes the timings were wrong. So they always recommended to get to the bus stop an hour early. So knowing what bus you need to take to get to where you need to go to get to your class. And breathe a little easy because there's always the understanding that the buses were sometimes late. And at the same time, you had a 15-minute grace period. Even
Yeah.
though we love to be punctual, there's a 15-minute grace period before you're marked tardy or absent.
Oh man, oh man. Yeah, we had the same thing offered at our school. Now, my school, when I went to college, I didn't have the hugest campus, but we had a pretty decently large size campus. And our town that I went to school in was considered a college town. But that being said, our college probably spread between like maybe 20 or so buildings, and that does include the dorms. So, and it is subjective in a way because some of the buildings are larger than others. It's not like a small schoolhouse type of thing. There would be buildings that were multiple stories high and very wide. And so it's really important to get a lay of the land, know exactly where you need to go, know which buses take you to the specific building. At my school, when I went to college, I remember seeing a bunch of different bus loops, and they would have the names of like the different buildings that they were going to, including the university apartments as well. However, you had to really pay attention because we didn't have like the apps back then. We had to really like be cognizant and look at the buses and make sure that they had where we were going.
And if you ever have any questions with if you're at a school with buses, always talk to the bus drivers. A lot of the bus drivers are really sweet. At least at my last school, they were a joy to talk to. So they'll always put you in the right direction. And if they don't know, they'll call dispatch and then they'll tell you, okay, you need to get to this bus. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is really important. And then just to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned, having your room and, making sure that that is ultimately like set up to where you can completely have like a space for yourself, including a safe space too, because college is very overwhelming. It is very overstimulating. There's a lot of things that are involved in college, like classes, like trying to get to and from specific areas, like schedules, like other people, including, if you have one, a roommate.
yeah, which do want to get to that point in a second.
Yeah.
So I would love to emphasize that self-care, self-care, self-care. So you find yourself starting to get overwhelmed, take a break, find a safe space, collect yourself, get back to work because it's college. That is your job now. And um, the roommate situation. So that's going to vary whether or not you have one and the shared space and what that entails. So sometimes it's, okay, you are sharing a room with someone. Sometimes you are sharing a living room slash kitchen with somebody and a bathroom. Sometimes you're just by yourself and everything's hunky dory.
If you're lucky. In my case, if you're lucky. Um no.
Yeah.
Um in my personal experience, I lived in the dorms all the years that I was in college. And the reason why though I chose to live in the dorms for every year that I was in college was because I had a night job that actually required me to either live on campus or I could live in the university apartments. The issue with the university apartments though was that it was about a mile off of campus. And so for me, because I wanted to make sure that with my night job, I was getting there on time, I would either live in the exact same building or I would live one building over just to make sure that I could navigate to the building I was supposed to on time. And so that was a really crucial thing for me. And in the room that I had, we actually had shared bathrooms. So it was bathroom stall style. Same thing for the showers. It was bathroom stall style up until my senior year where we had a private bathroom. So, and when I say we, I mean me and my roommate had our own private bathroom as opposed to the entire hall shared a bathroom. So that's also really important to navigate is how are you going to handle this shared space together?
Yes. So I've seen it all. I've seen shared shower stalls in private bathrooms. I've seen shared bathroom with showers. I've just had one person sharing a bathroom with me with no kitchen, and then I've shared a space with a kitchen and a bathroom shower. And I've also commuted from home to school. So I've done quite a bit of versions of college. So let's start with the whole roommates. So when you do get to meet your roommate, um, try to be yourself. Whether or not you want to disclose, that is up to you. It is still private. It is your decision. Main things is communicating what boundaries you need to set mutually and how to communicate and navigate any disagreements, and the shared spaces if you do have them. And a lot of colleges are very upfront where they actually have you sign a little contract where you have to divvy up, okay, these are the chores that need to be done, who's going to do what, who's going to do it when. You actually have to sit down and go through these and then submit them.
One thing that I found beneficial, and I'm not sure if you have this experience or if any of our listeners have had this experience, but sometimes you'll actually get to know who your roommate is before. So, for instance, my freshman year, I did have an idea of who my roommate was, but then I found out she actually left the college and I ended up getting a different roommate. So, that in that case, that was something that I did not know. However, come the end of freshman year and every year after that, I actually had friends that I would end up rooming with. We would have conversations with each other about like how do we want the roommate situation to look? What types of boundaries do we need to uphold for ourselves? And so that was something that was really nice is also having the opportunity to choose roommates.
So I've had a little bit of both where I've had schools where they highly encourage and literally force you to get in touch with each other. My last school, you would find out who your roommate was, and it was up to you to reach out, and it was up to them to respond to.
Fair.
So it was I liked being able to get in touch like way beforehand. Like that was nice. Um, Being able to choose your roommate is nice as long as you know who's going and if you've met them before, which works a lot better as you go through college, not necessarily your freshman year, unless you have some buddies that you're going with.
And the conversation about boundaries and like what you need is extremely important to have. Remember, self advocacy doesn't just go for, advocating for yourself for what you need in classes or within your schedule. You have to be able to do it on a personal level too. If you notice that there are certain things that you need for yourself, then you need to be able to voice those. At the same time, though, remember, you're about to share a same space with another human being. And so, in those situations, you may have to come to a compromise and talk about how, you can potentially like compromise with them, even if it's something that may not necessarily be something that is preferred, for lack of a better term.
So coming to that happy medium where everyone agrees. So let's say you're with a roommate who works better when they're working in a noisy environment.
Hmm.
Headphones is a compromise
Exactly.
for
Exactly.
one of the two of you, because we live in a day and age of noise canceling headphones too. But,
Yes.
but there is a limit with that because your body is still going to feel the sound waves.
So, then what do you do in that case?
This is where you're going to possibly want to speak up and go, "Can you put your headphones on, please?"
Exactly, exactly. And that's where that self-advocacy has to come in. You have to be able to express exactly what you need in order for you and your roommate to have a good rooming experience. Sometimes communication doesn't always happen. And so at times there can be friction as a result of that. I know personally I ran into a very similar situation actually with headphones and listening to music. And we ended up having a conversation afterwards, but granted, we ended up having a little spat on social media and then we ended up having a conversation in person. I don't recommend taking those problems to social media, by the way. It's better to have a more like sit down conversation face to face with them because, obviously, like online, different
It will
tones.
escalate.
Exactly.
And yeah, I don't recommend it either. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. It does blow up. And then usually you get other departments involved to try and quell this. But when it gets to social media, then you're getting the outside world involved, in which case, depending on what is said, you don't want certain things out there or being said and the consequences of those actions.
Exactly. And certain people to look at them too. Remember, your online reputation can definitely be tarnished if you have certain information out there, and there are people who can read into that information.
Patience with roommates, it's constant negotiation. Things change, things evolve, and sometimes some of your roommates are going to be some of your long life friends. Sometimes schools will vary in who you'll pair up with. Sometimes you'll be paired with similar majors. A lot of times, in my experience, you're not. You're paired with someone who's in a completely different department.
Really? See, mine was opposite. I was actually paired with someone who was in my actual degree program. And we
Nice.
had, yeah, it was actually kind of nice because you could actually talk to them about classes. You could talk to them about, certain assignments and stuff. Some of them would actually be in like a majority of our classes. So we had more exposure to each other. So,
That made the routine a lot easier too, because you have the same schedule.
yes,
So you don't have to fight over the bathroom because you're like, I have to get to class. Well, you both have to get to class now, so you have to work around that, which is
exactly.
nice. Then you don't have also like late night classes versus morning classes, and oh, I work late on my homework, so you have to deal with someone who might have a light on during the night. So for those of you guys, anybody who's listening who doesn't sleep very easily, okay, you might want to invest in some earplugs or maybe some old-fashioned like mask where you can cover your eyes when you're sleeping. Some schools blackout curtains are recommended too, because I've been in a school where there was a street light literally outside the window that blared into the room. Adapt to the environment and change it to what you need. Definitely.
Absolutely, absolutely. Think about even like the temperature of your room. I know I'm a person who loves all things cold. I know there are people out there who do not like all things cold,
And
so
some of the schools I've been in, they literally have a survey for roommate matching, and temperature is one of them, noise levels is another, and
interesting.
whether or not you're a night owl or day person.
Yes, like what time do you wake up? What time do you go to bed?
Yes, so they try to match roommates based on that more than who's in the same major.
That's fair. That's fair. And that's actually a good way to look at roommate matching too, because you need to be able to have certain qualities that match each other too. Sometimes, we get told opposites attract, but at the same time, do opposites really attract in this kind of situation? Where if someone is an early bird and your roommate is a late night person, you know, there's bound to be, and I don't want to stereotype here, but there's bound to be some issues sooner or later.
Yeah. And one of my recommendations is be patient if someone's because everybody's learning at different levels. Some people have different levels of independent skills. I had a roommate who was learning how to cook for the first time. I let him completely have the kitchen. I ate the school food at the time, so I'm like, have the kitchen. Whatever mess you make is yours. If I
Exactly.
I put my foot down as if I see flies though, you're gonna hear from me. And there
That's
were
a
a couple instances of that.
that's a really good boundary. That's a really good boundary, actually.
Yeah. He did thank me for giving him the space to learn. So I'm like, awesome.
I think that's so crucial, to be able to be given that kind of space, especially if you're doing something for the very first time and, especially when you have a shared space like a kitchen together. We actually did not have a kitchen in any of my like actual dorm rooms. We had a shared community space that had a kitchen in it, but we did not have an actual kitchen in our room. So, learning those types of skills, if you were going to do that, you would have to share it not just with your roommate, but with the entire floor. Same thing for
Yeah.
laundry too.
Those are general recommendations we have for like trying to navigate the roommate situation. And it's going to take a lot of talking. And if there are problems, there are usually systems in place where you can pull in a third party to try and mediate to get to a common ground.
Usually that comes in the form of a resident assistant or otherwise known as an RA, or like a floor monitor, depending on how your school works. So if you need that third party, definitely make sure you have them involved. But no matter
Yeah.
what, keep the line of communication open.
And if it's in regard to your own accommodation needs, then there's always a disability department that can also act as a third party, depending on the school. Like
Absolutely.
my last school was wonderful. They would mediate and just go, okay, this person actually needs this in order to function. So you cannot deny them this. What you are actually doing more harm than good by trying to insist that they could adapt.
That's actually a really valuable tip, especially for those who do need more accommodations when it comes to the living situation. So don't be afraid to get your disability department involved.
Beyond that, if you don't have a kitchen, make sure you know all the good places to eat because that's also part of your self care.
Yep. That's a crucial part of self-care is being able to feed yourself.
Will factor into your routine. Okay, this is I like to eat this here. I like to eat this here because I'm the type of person I go to a restaurant. I like one thing on their menu, and I'm good.
Yes. And on that note too, make sure, you have everything together. You have your keys together, you have your cards together, but also to make sure you get an idea of the lay of the land. If you have to talk to your disability accommodations department about, getting a tour of the school, even if it's a private tour, talk to them. That's why the department is there. They're there to help you.
Moving forward, when we get to our next episode, we'll be talking more academics. So between now and then, I highly recommend to look at your syllabi and get your books, also
Yes.
and supplies, depending on the school you're at. I've been at art school, so your supply is usually a long list.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to our episode. Looking
Yeah,
forward to the
and
next one.
yeah, look forward to part two where we get to talk on the academic side.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.